What's up, Flannelverse? Hope you're ready for a fun Sunday Night Football game. We've got the Jets at the Steelers. Russell Wilson starting for the Steelers. We have DJ Reed out, as well as Michael Carter for the Jets. Kind of an interesting one. I'm getting DMs from Adam tilting about the kick for the Raiders, and I am myself tilting about that also because I'm this close to winning the cage match yet again this week, but I needed a touchdown from either Brock Bowers or Trey Tucker. And looks like that's probably not going to happen because they cowardly decided to kick it on fourth down at the 9-yard line to still be down by 5 points. So I don't know what the Raiders are thinking. Everything hurts is exactly right. That's exactly how I feel. I was all in on Jaden Daniels today. Feel like that was the right play. Just looking at how the rest of the slate went, the way it started for Jaden Daniels, man, that did not go well. The Vikings lost. Yeah, Brandon. It was not a great day for me around, I think best ball was fine, but DFS did not go well for me today. Starting with the morning, I mean, this morning just Brian Thomas went off. Kayshon Boutte did absolutely nothing. So hopefully tonight we are going to make all that money back on the showdown slate. And it is kind of it's an interesting one. I don't know that I call it a fun one necessarily. It's an interesting one though. 40, yeah, it's that's pretty solid. Kenneth Walker crushed. Bowers doing really well. Debo, Daniels, brutal. And injuries just all around injuries. Jaden Daniels, and that obviously hurts the rest of his pass catchers. Also, you have I don't really know that Aiden O'Connell being injured really does all that much to hurt the Raiders, but I think he's probably. I mean, the way Minshew was today, have to imagine that Aiden O'Connell is better than Minshew played today. Andy Dalton just terrible. That's just he was just bad. I thought he would do well against the Commanders. He was not good against the Commanders. So brutal day, but we're gonna make it all back tonight. We'll talk through this. Yeah, Tank Dell. That one. I was all in. Not all in, but I played a ton of Tank Dell. That one hurt quite a bit. Just I don't know what's going on there. CJ Stroud just forgetting about him. Not even being targeted. Deontay Johnson not really being targeted today after being just a target hog ever since Andy Dalton came. So I don't know what went on today. It was a brutal day all around. But we're gonna walk through this showdown slate. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defense, kickers. I'll take some questions at the end, build some lineups. If you have any questions, you can ask them throughout. But at the end, I'll kind of have a designated time for anything that is left over. While you're coming, if you have not already done so, I am trying to get to 5,000 subscribers. I'm at 3,400 now. Just got up to above 3,400. So if you would subscribe, I would appreciate it. Did Ray Davis score a touchdown? I totally missed that. I actually had him on my my cage match team and didn't even notice that he scored a touchdown. Yeah, if you subscribe, I would appreciate it. I will take a look at FanDuel the usual time after I've gone through all of the players. We'll take a brief look at most of what I talk about applies to both. I'm just looking at usage, looking at defensive matchups, but we'll take a look at the salaries at the end on FanDuel, see if there's anything that really stands out there. But most of the show I'm going to be looking at DraftKings salaries, DraftKings projected ownership, all of that. All right. Start with the quarterbacks, and again, we have Russell Wilson taking over as the starter for the 4-2 Steelers. I don't get it, but apparently Justin Fields himself says he did not play well enough to hold on to the role. So maybe he didn't do as well as a 4-2 quarterback normally does. I don't know. I think he's better than Russell Wilson, but we're getting Russell Wilson tonight. Aaron Rodgers, of course, on the other side. Looking at projected ownership in the MVP, we have Aaron Rodgers projected for 30%. I'm just going to reset this just in case. That feels so high. Oh, we're on FanDuel here. That's why. I'm on FanDuel. All right, let me switch this up. It'll be more reasonable, I'm sure, on DraftKings. And got to switch the slate now. All right, getting to it. At captain, we have. Why is Justin Fields? Let me sort by projected ownership. Aaron Rodgers coming in at 17% projected ownership. Okay, that's much more reasonable. And then you have, where is Russ? Russell Wilson at sub 3% ownership. So that's going to stand out to me right away. Russell Wilson being at sub 3% ownership. Because we have, again, DJ Reed out. We have Michael Carter out. Just a banged up secondary for the Jets. And even though they're really good, they're probably still going to be pretty good. It's a big thing when you lose starters, you're playing backups. It's going to be a big step down, at least in theory. It should be. So it should be an easier matchup for the Steelers than you are used to. And nobody's playing them. Everybody wants to play the Jets. I get it. They're the big names. They're more exciting. They got Davante Adams. They have Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson's still there. Michael, what's his name? Mike Williams. I want to say Michael Thomas. Mike Williams. I think is still active for this game. I believe he practiced in full on Friday. I'm not really expecting him to play, but there were rumors that maybe the Steelers want to trade for Mike Williams. They're in the mix to potentially trade for him. So maybe it's an audition spot for Mike Williams. I don't know, but we'll talk about that when we get to receivers. But he is, I believe, actually active, which I thought they might just make him inactive. Anyway, I like the ownership on Russ at 3% in the captain. I'm going to be overweight to that for sure. I think it's an easier defensive matchup with the injuries in the secondary for the Jets. I think it's actually a better matchup than it appears on paper for Russell Wilson. We'll talk about some of his issues when we talk about the pass catchers, but I think at this price tag, at this ownership, that is pretty interesting to me. I think I'll be on that. Aaron Rodgers, not as exciting when he's coming in at 17%. I'll probably be close to the field there, maybe just a little bit under the field on Aaron Rodgers, but 17%, enough that I'm not like dying to play that. That's second chalkiest player on the slate. In the flex, we've got Aaron Rodgers at 47% projected ownership, Russell Wilson at 34% projected ownership. Again, I'm going to like that number on Russell Wilson, try to get above that a little bit. He does run a little bit. He's not like an elite runner, but he, does run at least a little bit. Yeah, this is Liam asks, any thoughts on reports saying both quarterbacks will play for the Steelers? It does kind of hurt things a little bit with Russell Wilson. I'm still gonna have interest in Russell Wilson, and just hope that they score from outside the 5-yard line. But I do have concerns / excitement for Fields. That Fields, if they're going to use him sparingly, and the reports have been kind of that Russell Wilson is going to play. He's going to play the bulk of the game, but we're going to see specific packages for Justin Fields. It's kind of my takeaway from what I've read, the rumors there, which to me would mean probably Fields more likely to be in there in obviously in running situations. If they need a dual threat, they bring in Justin Fields. So that would make sense. Like if you're in the, at the 5-yard line, bring in Justin Fields, which is not great for Russell Wilson. You'd love to not have that threat there. But yeah, I think Fanatic. What's up, Fanatic? Fanatic, a longtime hater, pretending like he doesn't know who I am. All right, see you later, Fanatic. So Fields, yes. Russell Wilson, yes, I have interest there. Not concerned. Yes, it is a negative for Russell Wilson that Justin Fields is a threat there, but not enough that I'm not going to play him when he is at fairly low ownership. Oh, good news. Andre says the Rams are punting. Maybe one more shot for Brock Bowers or Trey Tucker. Not enough that I'm going to be scared off of Russell Wilson. I'm going to be playing a good amount, probably overweight to the field. But that does kind of that does bring a third quarterback into play here a little bit. I'll get through the two starters first. Russell Wilson, even though he does run a little bit, he runs, more than Aaron Rodgers does. I still think both quarterbacks, I'm going to require pass catcher, regardless of where I have them in the lineup. If I have them in the flex or in the captain spot, going to be requiring at least one pass catcher. In the captain spot for both of these quarterbacks, I'm probably going to be requiring at least 2 pass catchers. Again, because of the scoring dynamics on DraftKings and FanDuel, where the pass catcher outscores the quarterback on every single passing play. They get a point per reception or a half point on FanDuel. They get more points per yard, more points per touchdown, et cetera, et cetera. You really need, for non-rushing quarterbacks, you need them to be spreading the ball around for the quarterback to be optimal at captain, because if they focus too much on one pass catcher, that pass catcher is going to outscore them. Quarterbacks usually also some of the more expensive, so you don't really have the out of them just being cheap enough. So yeah, I'm going to be requiring. Am I muted? Anybody else? Can you confirm this? I don't see anything that says I'm muted. Let me know if I am muted for any of you. But anyway, Yeah, both of these quarterbacks, I'm requiring multiple pass catchers if I have them in the captain spot, only requiring one if I have them in the flex as usual. Okay. Uh, the third quarterback already alluded to Justin Fields. That there are rumors that Justin Fields might have a role here, might actually get a little bit of playing time, have specific packages for him. Um, do we have any ownership? I think. Oh yeah, Justin Fields. Okay, here we have 0% projected ownership. The projection is 1.35. So not expecting a ton. Now I'm seeing a notification coming through says Trey Tucker stone hands. Well, that sucks. Justin Fields 0% projected ownership. I can't imagine it's actually 0%. To be clear, there are people like everybody has heard the rumors that that maybe he's going to have some specific packages. So I do think that there is. There's going to be more ownership on Justin Fields than 0%, but I'm curious to see what other places. Actually, just going to pull up some other sources just to see if anybody is giving him any kind of ownership. Because the ownership projections are affected by the projections on the site. Obviously, RotoGrinder is not really giving him any kind of projection, and I think that's probably right to not really project him for anything. You don't want to lead people into playing a ton of this guy, but I do think it's he might have some packages. They might be in the red zone, and in a low scoring game, even at his price tag, you don't expect him to score a lot of fantasy points. I'm not expecting. I think best case scenario for Justin Fields, absent like an early injury to Russell Wilson, is probably like 13 fantasy points. Like if he scores a couple touchdowns, or maybe he does come in and just has a 50-yard run, maybe 15. I don't know. I don't really. It's unlikely that he scores much more than that. But because this is such a low scoring slate, I think that would be enough. And even if he just scores has one 5-yard rush and then another 20-yard rush, that's not for 5-yard touchdown and then another 20-yard rush. That only has the one touchdown, maybe 30 rushing yards, doesn't really do much else. That might be enough if this game is really low scoring. So I might have just a little bit of interest in Justin Fields. I don't want to go crazy with it. I don't want to make it sound like he is a smash play or anything like that. But yeah, coming in at 0% ownership, I think that he's better than the typical backup quarterback. And people, sometimes like to play those backup quarterbacks. Nobody's going to play him. Rams interception, brutal. Okay. So I don't want to make it sound like he's some awesome play, but I do think he's better than your typical backup quarterback play, because coming in at 0 ownership, we're expecting to see him at least in some packages. And again, it would make sense to have Justin Fields in there for those red zone packages where they have a chance to score a rushing touchdown, maybe need a dual threat quarterback at the 5-yard line. It would make sense to bring in Justin Fields. It would make sense for those to be the specific packages they bring him in for. So yeah, I have a little bit of interest in Justin Fields, but it's more like if I play 20 lineups, and I think I'm playing 30 lineups tonight, I probably want him in 1 to 2, just as a what if he does have that opportunity and nobody's playing him? You can get ahead of the field pretty easily on what should be a low scoring slate. So I think it's pretty interesting. And then of course he also has the contingent value if anything happens to Russell Wilson in injury, or if Russell Wilson is just as bad as he has been in some games last year. I think there is a chance that Russell Wilson plays himself off the field. I think it would take a lot for Russell Wilson to play himself off the field, but there's at least a chance there that happens. So yes, ton of interest in Russell Wilson. I don't love the idea of playing them together. I might not set the rule. I might set a rule not to play them together. But yeah, a lot of interest in Russell Wilson. In non-Russell Wilson lineups, I'll probably have 1 or 2 shares out of 30 lineups of Justin Fields. And then the other side, Aaron Rodgers, a little bit chalkier than I love, but still coming in sub 70% ownership. It looks like around mid 60s kind of ownership, low 60s. I think that's a reasonable number for Aaron Rodgers. Doesn't really run, so needs to be throwing the ball. I prefer him in the flex to quarterback, but I'll have some Aaron Rodgers at quarterback as well. Probably more I'll probably have 10%. I'm going to be fading the field a little bit on Aaron Rodgers. He's coming in at 17% captain ownership. I'll be lower than that, but I'll be happy to get to 47% of Aaron Rodgers in the flex. Okay. I think that's enough about quarterbacks. Already went over the correlations. So let's move down, talk about some running backs here. And of course, it starts with Breece Hall. Highest projected for 17.6 fantasy points on the Fantasy Points website. Roto Grinders has him for 18.7 points, 48% flex ownership for Breece Hall, 33.5% captain ownership. That is nuts. Like, you don't see this high of captain ownership very often. Maybe this is another one. I kind of want to check another source just to see if this is okay. Other places have him about 10% lower. Still pretty significant ownership. And I don't know necessarily that this number is wrong for what Roto Grinders has. Like, it is higher than I would like. I will definitely be lower than that. I'll probably limit myself to maybe I'll set a cap at like 20% Breece Hall, just because I like to spread out my captain ownership a little bit. But he's an obviously good play. I guess we should look at. I didn't look at the schedule adjusted stuff for quarterbacks, so I'll just take a look at that, read it off real quick. I think we know that it's not great matchups. Yeah, fourth worst matchup for Pittsburgh, but again, they're missing DJ Reed and Michael Carter, so should be a little bit easier than normal for the Steelers. Still not going to be a super easy matchup, but a little bit easier than the fourth worst schedule adjusted matchup for the Steelers. And then for Pittsburgh, looks like they are the seventh worst schedule adjusted matchup for Aaron Rodgers. Just it's a tough game. All in all, two really good defenses that we're dealing with here. But it's at least notable that the Jets are missing defensive pieces that make it a little bit easier for Russell Wilson and the Pittsburgh offense. As far as running backs, I think it's going to be more of the same. I did look at this yesterday. I should know. Looks like it's a bottom 10 or so matchup for the Jets running game. So Breece Hall, not a great matchup with Pittsburgh, as we know. Where is Pittsburgh on here? Oh yeah, right. Sorry. Pittsburgh here. Oh, they're back to back. That's why I missed it. Okay. Both like bottom 10 or so matchups. Not great. Not a great spot for either of the running games, but got to play players from this one game. So we'll make do with the players that we have at our disposal. Let's take a look at Breece Hall's usage for in recent weeks. See how things have looked. So sorted here by week 6, Breece Hall, 18 carries, took on more of a workload last week. 18 carries and 6 targets on 68.4% route participation last week. Really nice usage there for Breece Hall. Buffalo, kind of a run funnel. So as expected, he was used quite a bit. And actually, Buffalo, more of a pass funnel for running backs. Is if you look at like schedule adjusted stuff, that was something we talked about last week. I think they were on a showdown slate against Buffalo, so we talked about it. That it was kind of a spot where running backs really good through the air against the Bills, and so it makes sense that Breece Hall targeted 6 times, 68.4% route participation. But he's had really strong usage throughout the year. If you look at the full season numbers for Breece Hall, 83 carries in 6 games. That's pretty strong. Not like 20 carries a game, but good enough. What's that, 13 or so? 33 targets on the season in 6 games, so a little bit more than 5 targets per game. The usage very, very strong for Breece Hall, and this is because of the matchups being so tough all around. We're expecting low scoring games. These are games where often who is your chunky pick? I don't know what that means. This is a game where, leaning on some PPR scoring makes sense. So Breece Hall, that means, running backs, tight ends, slot receivers tend to be better, like low ADOT, just like PPR scam type plays. Breece Hall definitely fits that as a running back who's targeted quite a bit. So it makes sense that he is going to get a good amount of ownership. I have no real issue with the ownership. I am going to be lower than the 33% that Rotogrind is projecting for at captain. Lower, probably. I'll probably set my cap at 20% Breece Hall at captain and just eat that. I think that is a reasonable number. You want to have some exposure there if the entire field is there. I think it makes sense. If I was making one lineup, though, I would not play Breece Hall at captain just because the ownership is so high. You're competing with the entire field. With one lineup, I would probably not go there. But in my 30 lineups, I'll probably have 20% Breece Hall. I think that is a reasonable number. And in the flex, we have Breece Hall, 48% ownership. Yeah, no issue with that. I'll probably eat that, maybe even be above weight. I might be just lower on Breece Hall and the captain, maybe even above weight to this in the flex. I think he's a great play. A lot of ways to get there on the ground, through the air. He can rack up fantasy points, even in a tough matchup. So I think that is fine. Braylon Allen, kind of interesting also. So Braylon Allen, where's he projecting? He's 3,800, projected for 23% ownership, has a 5.5 projection here at Roto Grinders. If we look at last week, he was actually not used as much. Braylon Allen down to just 3 carries last week, saw 2 targets on 7.9% route participation. So his usage has been kind of all over the place. It's never really spiked that high, but he had a game with 11 carries in week 4, 8 carries in week. Oh, wait. Am I sorted right here? Wait. I'm all messed up. Oh, I am. Okay, so I'm sorted the right way here. So in week 3, he had 11 carries. Week 4, he had 8 carries. So kind of a decline since it was looking like he was going to have a really strong role early in the year. It has kind of declined in recent weeks, but I think he's been good enough that I would expect him to continue to see a good amount of usage. He has dealt with some drops, so I kind of wonder if they've kind of taken him out. His routes have dropped significantly over the past few weeks. So some concern there. He still would make sense to be the goal line back. He is just a big, bruising rookie running back. It would make sense. It would make sense for them to use him at the goal line. They haven't done it yet, but I'm still hopeful that at some point he will have more of that role. I think he is fine. It's not ownership that I'm really going to lean into with Braylon Allen being at 23% projected ownership. I think it's okay. It's not my favorite, again, because he's not the best receiving back, at least from what I've seen. I'm basing this on a few games that I've watched of the Jets where he's just dealt with drops, and the declining route participation, probably a bad sign for Braylon Allen, but he is 3,800. He's been a really strong runner, and he obviously has contingent value if anything happens to Breece Hall. So there are a lot of things going in Braylon Allen's favor. So not going to be like full fading 23%, but I do imagine I will be probably a little bit light. Nah, I might end up close to 23% on Braylon Allen. It's not the worst play. I think I could see myself getting close to 23% because sometimes these big bruising backs are the ones who can succeed against tough defenses. So maybe he's the guy that just ends up having success against this Steelers defense. Carries them on his back, scores some touchdowns. I think 23% is fair for Braylon Allen. Not like a stand that I want to be well above that or anything, but 3,800, I think it's reasonable. I might end up there. I'll think about it as we talk about other players. I think that's the spot that I might end up lightly fading if there are places that I find that I want to get above on, but not. I think 23% is totally fine there. Okay. So then the other side is the Steelers, and you have Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. Najee Harris projecting for 13.6 fantasy points, Jaylen Warren 9 fantasy points. Both getting a fair amount of ownership. And again, it's not a great match. You look at the schedule adjusted stuff. It is a bottom 10 matchup for the Steelers. The lack of, the injuries to cornerbacks, I don't think affects the running game quite as much as it does the passing game. So still going to be a tough matchup for the Steelers running backs. No Cordero Patterson, no Shamklin I think, is that his name? Is inactive today. So should be mostly these two getting the bulk of the carries. So that is the plus for Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. But it's a really tough matchup. The ownership is also really strong on both. Jaylen Warren projected for 30% flex ownership. Najee Harris, 40% flex ownership. In the captain spot, we have Najee Harris coming in at 6% ownership. Jaylen Warren coming in at 6% also. They're right back to back here. I don't hate the captain ownership. I do think I'm going to be fading the flex ownership. I think this is a spot where it's just a little bit much more for me. 40% Najee Harris. Maybe I'll try and get to 25, 30%, something like that. But it is a spot that I'm going to be fading the Pittsburgh running backs. Jaylen Warren also, he's only 4,000. But 30% ownership is quite a bit, just given his role. If we look at on the season, what does his role look like? Oh, wrong team. On the season, Jaylen Warren just 20 carries, and he was hurt, so he's only played 4 games, but 5 carries per game, 2 targets per game. Like, that's just not great usage. Maybe if he, stayed healthy longer, the usage would increase, and maybe we see that here. I'm not totally convinced that his role is going to be that much better here. We haven't really seen any reason to think he's going to have a much better role. But let's take a look at week 6 specifically. Was he? Yeah, he was in for week 6. He did play 22 snaps, so 35.5% snap share. Pretty good. Did have 6 attempts in that game and 3 targets on 28% route participation. So slightly better than average in week 6. Maybe it's possible that he does see an expanded role going forward, but not really counting on it from Jaylen Warren. I think this is kind of the expectation. If he has 6 rushes and 3 targets, I would say that is, on the above average from what I expect. He could certainly have more. He obviously has great contingent value if anything happens to Najee Harris. So there are reasons to really like Jaylen Warren, but the ownership is enough that I think that I end up being a little bit underweight to Jaylen Warren. Also going to be a little bit underweight to Najee Harris. Again, he had 14 carries last week with Jaylen Warren back, 2 targets, and he hasn't really been that big of a target. 18 targets on the season, so he's been targeted about 3 times per game, 44.4% route participation, and that includes games with Jaylen Warren out. So you kind of have to think his role probably reduced a little bit with Jaylen Warren back for this one. I don't know. It's just it's kind of a gross split, and it's a tough matchup with the Jets defense, and they're getting ownership. So factoring all of that in, I think I'm going to be a little bit light on both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, and play it more through the passing game, through the Jets running backs. But mostly I am going to have some interest in the passing game. As I mentioned, I like Russell Wilson. So we will talk about the Steelers pass catchers as well. I think that was all the running backs that are even borderline in play. Yeah, Champlin is out. So Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren. I'm probably going to be underweight on the Steelers. Pretty close to the field on the Jets, except for lightly fading Breece Hall at captain. Okay, wide receivers. Got to refresh this. I'll find the right slate first. All right, so Davante Adams, new to New York, and everything they keep saying is that he's going to have a full workload. So I'm trusting them. I'm believing them that Davante Adams is going to have a full workload tonight for the Jets. So I have interest there. I think Davante Adams going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate. But let's take a look at the ownership here. 39% projected ownership in the flex. I'll take it. I'll play 39% Davante Adams. I'll probably be right with the field there. Could see myself being a little bit overweight to the field even. I think that is totally reasonable number. Just 5% projected ownership in the captain spot. That's a spot that I imagine myself getting on top of. You can just picture a game, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it's certainly within the range of outcomes that Aaron Rodgers just peppers him with like 15 targets a day. I mean, he's done it with Garrett Wilson. Now he gets his guy to come over to New York, makes the trade happen. They're back together. They're happy to be back together. You can kind of see it where Aaron Rodgers just peppers him with targets. So I think it's within the range of outcomes that we see a ton of Davante Adams today. And he's not coming in with crazy high ownership, particularly in the captain spot. I think that 5%, I really like that. The flex ownership, I think, is more about where it should be. But the 5% captain ownership, I will lean in on that on Davante Adams. Because again, the coaches have said he's ready for a full workload. We're not going to have any limitations. His first game back with Aaron Rodgers could be a fun one. We've seen them. I mean, these two are just really good together. So I do have a lot of interest in Davante Adams. He's also, should just pick up PPR points, but also capable of a lot more. So really interested in Davante Adams, particularly at captain. Let me get rid of this spam. All right. That one's pretty straightforward. Everybody knows. I think it's straightforward. I guess it's a little bit weird in that he is coming to a new team, and you don't really know what to expect. How much are they going to use him in his first game? But I think Aaron Rodgers kind of just does what Aaron Rodgers wants to do, and I think he's going to want to get Davante Adams the ball. He's played with Davante Adams enough. He knows the routes, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not that concerned about it. I kind of think he just slots in and is a full-time starting receiver immediately who gets a lot of usage. Hopefully this is not all just like a red herring decoy kind of situation, but I really don't think it's going to be. I am going to be playing a good amount of Davante Adams. Interesting. Brandon says Brandon Johnson was elevated for tonight's game. In Russell Wilson's last game, he had 5 targets. Anything there? So when was that? You mean like on the Broncos? I don't think there's anything there, but that's an interesting note. Um, I don't think there's anything there. I'll think about it though more with Denver. Yeah. Um, so Davante Adams, yes. In Garrett Wilson, it's tough because I talk about that he got Aaron Rodgers gets Davante Adams. Now he's going to pepper him with targets because they're happy to be together, et cetera, et cetera. What about the other side? Maybe Aaron Rodgers is like, no, you're still going to be a big part of our game plan. Going to be using a ton of Garrett Wilson. The interesting thing is, so I think Garrett Wilson's still very much in play, 9,200, projected for 8.5% captain ownership. I don't love that. I think it's like fine, not a huge stand I'm going to be taking there. 37% projected ownership in the flex. Nothing really standing out to me there. That just strikes me as like the field is probably about where it should be on Garrett Wilson. The interesting thing is, can you play them together, Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson? It's a close one. I think I would say yes, but it's not my favorite. Like I don't think I'm going to set a rule to not play them together. But they're so expensive that it is going to get a little bit tough. No, I think you can do it. I think it's totally fine because they'll rack up PPR points. Should be a low scoring game, so you're not going to need that many points. Yeah, I think it's fine to play them in a lineup together. But no, not taking any major stand. I'll probably be a little bit light at captain on Garrett Wilson and be heavier on Davante Adams at captain. But no real issue with it. Outside of those two, Allen Lazard. So this one, he's 7,400. Doesn't project that well at 7,400. Looking at the ownership on Lazard in the flex, projecting for 20% ownership at 7,400. I mean, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna fade Allen Lazard again. It has hurt me. It has hurt me multiple times already this year. I'm not a big believer in the talent there with Allen Lazard. Did have like an amazing catch last week, as I recall, but I'm not a huge believer in the talent, and just can't imagine he's gonna hold on to much target share with both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson there. Like as a wide receiver 3 at 7,400, the price is just too high, particularly against the Steelers defense. I don't know. I don't think the pie is big enough to really support him because both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson are huge target hogs. I mean, Garrett Wilson has, I think, the most targets in the NFL coming into this week, I believe. Davante Adams certainly has that type of target earning in him as well. So I just can't imagine that Allen Lazard retains much of a role with Davante Adams there. So that will be a pretty big fade for me. I might end up with 0 Lazard in 30 lineups. Other places do have him at lower ownership, but still not like super low. So I think Lazard is just going to be, yeah, I mean, that you're absolutely right. Like it's just like he's going to do nothing except for score 3 touchdowns at the 1 yard line because that is what Aaron Rodgers loves to do. Certainly a possibility, but I'm going to take that chance and just not play the $7,400 wide receiver 3 against the Jets. I'm going to go with the starters instead. Yeah, it's just too much, for 20% ownership at 7,400 as the wide receiver 3. I don't love it. I don't love it for Allen Lazard. I'm curious if he's getting any captain ownership. I can be certain that, it's only 1%. I was going to say that would be a certain fade for me, but the field is also fading him, so not any major stand there. And then Mike Williams, similarly, like this is what I've done. I've done the Mike Williams instead of Allen Lazard in the past. He's cheaper, taking on a bigger role. He was so bad last week. Aaron Rodgers hates him, wanted to just send him to the moon. Yeah, I don't think I can get there with Mike Williams. I don't think he's going to play a ton in this game. I was hoping it would be inactive, so I don't even have to think about it. But I don't think I'm going to get there. Do we even have a projection for him at Roto Grinders? Go to just flex. 1.4 is a projection, not projecting for any ownership. I mean, the lack of ownership makes it almost interesting to me, but I just don't really think he's going to play much. I think it's going to be just Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson. I think Allen Lazard will play. So I don't think Mike Williams comes in for much, if anything. So I don't think I see myself getting there at all. But, if you want to make the case, he is still like he theoretically, as I've said in the past, like he theoretically should be a big end zone threat who can just win a ball you throw up there and let him win a battle with a cornerback. He's certainly a guy who could do it, but I just don't think they're going to use him much, is at least my assumption here. So I don't think I'm going to be going to any Mike Williams. Okay. Any other? No, I'm not going to Xavier Gibson either. I think it's just kind of, for me, it's just between the big three, and I'm really just focusing on the big two: Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard. No, see ya. I don't think I want it. Pittsburgh. So again, we have multiple injuries to the secondary for the Jets. Michael Carter has been out for a few weeks now. Now we have DJ Reed out as well, one of the better cornerbacks in the entire NFL. So it does get much easier for the Steelers, and I don't know that the field is going to react enough to that. It's also a home game for Pittsburgh, so I'm very much in on just like playing Pittsburgh in this game because they are going to be really low owned, like just across the board, other than the running back. So I'm kind of just inverting what the field is doing. The field is playing a lot of the Steelers running backs, not much else from the Steelers. I am just doing kind of the opposite of that. I'm going to be playing a lot more of the Steelers, which, it's because of the ownership, because all the ownership is going to the Jets. So I do have a lot of interest in George Pickens, particularly at captain. Just hope that he can take advantage of these backup cornerbacks, see a lot of volume. Projected for just 31% flex ownership and he's only 8,400. So projected for 31% flex ownership at 8,400. Give me that over Lazard at 7,400 all day. At captain, we have George Pickens at 8% projected ownership. I'll be above weight to that as well. We haven't seen him yet with Russell Wilson. We don't really know what they can do together. But I do have a lot of interest in George Pickens. I'm going to be overweight both in the flex and the captain spot, I think, on George Pickens. I'm just hoping that they can take advantage of this banged up Jets secondary. Who knows? Who knows if Russell Wilson is capable of that? But that is at least my hope. Andres, I'd go Pittsburgh D over Conklin today. So yeah, a lot of interest in George Pickens. Kelvin Austin is my second favorite. He is the second best projected from Pittsburgh. Just looking at, and we can look at on the season, running out of the slot a ton. Let's see, Kelvin Austin, 60% slot rate on the season. Should be a good spot. I mean, this is historically the better place for receivers against the Jets secondary. Now we have Michael Carter out. I mean, still have Michael Carter out. It seems like a good spot for Kelvin Austin. And just looking at his usage has been decent, not like amazing, but decent. Last week, let me make sure this is sorted by week correctly. Last week, 50% route participation for Kelvin Austin. 5 targets though. So really strong target share last week, second on the team behind George Pickens. In week 5, it was 80.6% route participation, saw 2 targets, and he's mostly running out of the slot. So all things considered, I'm interested in Kelvin Austin today. Love that he's running from the slot. Should see a good amount of usage. On the season, 17 targets. That's third best on the team. Hoping that he can get it done with Russell Wilson. I did think it was like, as I was thinking about this, like my instinct is to love all of the running backs who catch the ball, tight ends, slot players. It is kind of funny though when you think about Russell Wilson. Last year there was the kind of a joke going around that kind of seemed to be reality also, that Russell Wilson just like doesn't see the middle of the field. He had Nate Tice did a thing for The Athletic last year, talking about he had the lowest rate of throwing over the middle of any quarterback in the NFL. So that's the one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, is that he just doesn't really throw over the middle of the field. And those are like, that's the spot you want to attack the Jets today, I think. So I do have some concern about that. Yeah, would have went swimmingly on the main slate if we had just played the bad players. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what I do often on Showdown. So I think Kelvin Austin, pretty interesting. I think this is also a reasonable take. Andre says you think Sauce will shut down Pickens. Actually, let's take a look at the chart. Are we expecting a shadow situation here? No, not a shadow situation, at least. But yeah, might see some Sauce Gardner. I don't think Sauce Gardner typically does shadow, although as I recall, he said this summer that he wanted to shadow number one receivers more than he had in the past. Looks like fantasy points is not projecting it to be a strict shadow situation. He'll obviously see some coverage from Sauce Gardner, but I think George Pickens will see enough of like the backup cornerbacks that, even if he is shut down when he's going up against Sauce Gardner, he'll have opportunities against other cornerbacks. So the fact that it's not projected to be a shadow situation is obviously a positive for George Pickens. Now maybe because DJ Reed is out, maybe they do decide to shadow him. Like this could be a situation where they switch things up because they're missing their other star cornerback. Maybe they just say, well, the Steelers really only have one star receiver. Let's just put Sauce on him. Absolutely could happen, but not projecting it that way, at least. So yeah, I like George Pickens. I do like Calvin Austin quite a bit. I think running the slot should be a good spot for him. Slight concern about the fact that Russell Wilson historically last year at least did not throw over the middle of the field at all. I do have some concern about that, but doesn't completely negate all of the positives. So yeah, interested in Calvin Austin. What is the projected ownership here? I want to say 23. Here, I'll sort. Did this change? 19% projected ownership in the flex. So I like that number. I'm going to be overweight to that on 2,400 Calvin Austin. Again, 5 targets last week. That is pretty strong. We don't have that many great options on the slate, so that's kind of one of the stronger value options, in my opinion, at 2,400, getting not that much ownership. So some interest there. Then you have Van Jefferson, who it's tough because he's a really boom bust type player just in general. Kind of always has been. 13 targets on the season, 63.3% route participation on the season for Van Jefferson. In week 6, 68.8, so a little bit better than average route participation, but saw 0 targets in week 6. Week 5, he did have a 5 target game in week 5, 77.4% route participation. Looks okay. 3 targets in week 4. Just again, only 13 targets on the season, and he's played all 6 games. So you're expecting about 2 targets in the game. Maybe he can house one. You probably need it for Van Jefferson to pay off. I like it a little bit worse than Calvin Austin, but let's take a look at the ownership here. Yeah, 15.5% ownership. So he's coming in a little bit lighter ownership, as I think he probably should. Not a huge priority for me. I think he's in play at 15% ownership. I'm probably going to try to essentially match the field. But yeah, not a huge priority for me. Okay. Interesting note from Matt that maybe Rodgers is forced to throw to Lazard against a good defense. It is certainly possible. All right. But I'm still not going there. Not doing it. All right. Any other wide receivers talk about? I don't think so. Don't think I'm going to any Scotty Miller. So yeah, George Pickens, yes, in Calvin Austin, yes, in Van Jefferson, meh, not really, and not playing any of Scotty Miller. Yeah, I think we covered it. I think we covered all of the wide receivers. So let's take a look at some tight ends. And these are, I think, some of the better low ownership, more contrarian plays on the slate come at tight end. Refresh this. Pat Freiermuth, best projection of any tight end on the slate. In the flex, coming in at 22% ownership. I think that has moved out throughout the day. 6,400, so pretty expensive for Pat Freiermuth, coming in at 22% ownership. Let's take a look at the game log a little bit on Freiermuth. So week 6, 65.6% route participation, 3 targets. Not a bad roll. It's fine. Week 5, Freiermuth, 74.2% route participation, 3 targets. Kind of what you're expecting from him. 78.6. 6 targets, and he was, so there was a brief period where he looked like he was coming on a little bit. 78.6% and 6 targets in week 4. Week 3, 5 targets on 82.9. So there was a little while where I was starting to get enthused about Pat Freiermuth, but it has kind of come down in recent weeks. You probably need a touchdown from Freiermuth. Like, he's not just going to do it on yardage and receptions. He's not going to PPR scam his way to a big score. You're probably going to need a touchdown for Freiermuth to get there, and he's getting 22% ownership. Don't think I'm like trying to get above that on Freiermuth. I think it's fine. I think it's a reasonable number there, but it's definitely a pay up to be not even that contrarian, but you're kind of paying for more usage than you're really getting there. I think I prefer it to. Do I prefer it to Lazard? It's pretty close actually. When you factor in everything, ownership, salary, all of that, it's enough that I think he needs a touchdown, most likely to pay it off. I mean, he could. Maybe this could be a game where he has 7 targets, catches 5 for 50, and that's enough. Like that is within the range of outcomes. But most likely, you're going to need a touchdown from Freiermuth for him to pay off his salary. And I'm not super confident that he's going to score one. But yeah, I think 15 or I'm probably going to come in a little bit light on 22% ownership, I guess is my takeaway. Not super light on it, but I think I probably come in a little bit light. It is also, though, like I said, a good spot for Freiermuth. So now I'm changing my mind. I think I'm changing my mind kind of mid-sentence. I think 22% seems fine because, again, we want to attack the middle of the field against this Jets defense with Michael Carter and DJ Reed out. If we're making the assumption that Russell Wilson can attack the middle of the field, which I think he's capable of doing it, then I think Freiermuth is in a pretty good spot here. So yeah, I'm changing my mind. I'm probably going to be right with the field. Probably not going to be a major fade there on Freiermuth. I think it's reasonable. Then you have Darnell Washington. Projecting for just 10.5% ownership. I like that. I think he's one of the better, low cost and also not owned players. Like it's not a slate that has a ton of them. I think Darnell Washington very much in play at 10.5%. I'm not necessarily going to come in over that. It's not like a slam spot for me. But he actually, as I recall, has been coming on a little bit more in recent weeks. Yeah, he did in week 6. And I'll just sort by his name so you can kind of see his whole progression. But 37.5% route participation in week 6, the best of the season. And you just look at like the first 3 games of the season versus the last 3. 5 targets over the past 3 games after seeing just 2 in the first 3, and more route participation. So I do think he's one of the better, maybe one of the better plays that is getting sub 10% ownership or right around 10% ownership. I think it was right at 10.5. I think that he's, we don't have a ton of great super contrarian plays on this slate. I think he is probably my second favorite of the sub 10% group. So yeah, I have interest in Darnell Washington. I'll probably be right with the field, not really taking a huge stand there, maybe a little bit over, just because he is so cheap, and love that his usage is increasing, at least, even if it is, I mean, again, 1 target last week, 2 each of the 2 prior weeks. He's like 6'7", theoretically a good end zone target. I believe he actually has 1 end zone touchdown where they threw it to him. Yeah, in week 5, his only end zone target, he did successfully score the touchdown on that. Theoretically, you'd think that they'd want to target him when they get into the end zone. Just a really big tight end, but also a great blocking tight end. So maybe they just don't use him there. But theoretically, a good end zone threat, and gets pretty solid usage. So yeah, not going to be like slamming him into my lineups, but I think I'll be right with the field there on Darnell Washington. Connor Hayward, as I recall, didn't play any of him the last game. The Steelers were on the Showdown slate, and then he ended up seeing like a handful of targets and scored a touchdown. That was a super frustrating game. Let's take a look at the game log. Yeah. So that was week 5. It must have been week 5 against Dallas, where he just had random spike week. Saw the same route participation as he had been seeing. He's just kind of the classic backup tight end where you're not seeing more than 1 target. He did have 4 in that one game against Dallas, but really not expecting a ton from Connor Hayward in terms of targets, in terms of route participation. Just the classic. He could score a touchdown, in which case you'll probably want him, but not a huge priority. He's also 600, so the price is nice, but hard for me to get to Connor Hayward. I'm definitely not enthusiastic about it. Maybe I'll have a share in 30 lineups, but I'm not really focusing on it. If he gets into a lineup or 2, I'm fine with it, but not a priority for me. On the other side of the game, we have Tyler Conklin and Jeremy Ruckert, and theoretically Anthony Firkser, but I don't think I'm going there. Tyler Conklin has been dealing with a little bit of he's been dealing with a hip injury, and he was dealing with it in the last game also. And actually, let's take a look at the week 6 usage, because I believe we actually saw a little bit more of Jeremy Ruckert. Yeah, 31.6% route participation in week 6 for Jeremy Ruckert to 60.5% for Tyler Conklin, relative to their usual numbers. I believe that's a little bit higher. Conklin, 73.2% route participation on the season, so 60%, a little bit lower route participation last week than he usually sees. Jeremy Ruckert usually just 18% on the season route participation. Last week, again, we saw 31.6%. So this week again, we had Tyler Conklin coming into today questionable. Like, there was no guarantee that Tyler Conklin was going to play tonight. He is playing, but it's kind of the same situation as last week, where you might get just a little bit more Jeremy Ruckert as a result of that hip injury for Tyler Conklin. So yeah, I'm going to have some interest in Tyler Conklin again. Last week, 60% route participation, only saw 2 targets, but he's been on the season targeted on the season targeted 27 times, third most of any Jets player. Obviously Davante Adams coming in should probably affect his target share a little bit, but I have interest in Tyler Conklin. Let's take a look at the ownership. Conklin coming in at 17% ownership at 4,400. I think that's totally reasonable. I might even end up coming in a little higher than that. Not a huge priority, but I think it's a reasonable amount of ownership for Tyler Conklin. But Jeremy Ruckert at 5%, I do think I'll lean in and be above weight to that on Jeremy Ruckert. He's only 1,600. Again, had his most route participation last week of any week this season. Saw 3 targets last week, pretty strong for a backup tight end. I think that he is one of the stronger options, just given, he just based on last week, he had more standalone value. No guarantee that it's going to be the same this week, but last week he had more standalone value than he typically has. But he also has the added contingent value because of the hip injury to Tyler Conklin. Again, heading into today, still limited with that hip injury. So I think a little bit more standalone value plus some more contingent value for Jeremy Ruckert can be kind of baked in, and he's not getting any ownership to reflect it. So I think Jeremy Ruckert is someone that I'll be above weight to 5%. Maybe I'll double that and have 10% Jeremy Ruckert in my lineups, something like that. I think he looks pretty good. I think that does it for tight ends. Those are all the tight ends. I guess we can let's take a look at schedule adjusted. I want to see if I missed anything important here. I guess we didn't look at wide receivers. Typically wide receivers and quarterbacks are highly correlated. And you can see Pittsburgh. It's a bottom 5 matchup for the Steelers, but again, the Jets are banged up in the secondary. Bottom 7 matchup for the Jets against the Steelers. It's a tough matchup all around. Nothing really standing out there. At tight end, it does look like a better than average matchup for Jets tight ends. The Steelers have given up the 5th most schedule adjusted fantasy points to tight ends. So another little cookie for Conklin and Ruckert here. Just the Steelers have been, they're good everywhere else and slightly bad at defending tight ends so far this year. So a little bit of a bonus there. Looks like a bottom 10 or 12 matchup for Steelers tight ends. Not ideal, but not something that makes a huge difference to me. I think the numbers are close enough there that it's not going to be a major factor for me. But nice to see that it's at least an above average matchup for Jets tight ends in what is otherwise a really tough game against the Steelers. Okay. Defenses, kickers, pretty important on a game like this where we are going to be expecting a low scoring game. Makes defenses and kickers more interesting in general. That is true. You got a martingale, but I still have Warren in best ball. So, I'm covered. Either way, I've got my bags packed. You can definitely play Freiermuth and Washington together if you want to. I think they kind of play different roles. Freiermuth out there all the time. Washington, you're just kind of hoping for a random touchdown. I'm also glad I decided not to MME this slate. I think that is a wise decision. All right, let's talk kickers and defenses. So Steelers defense. All right, this is higher than it was early in the morning, and I was super into it this morning when they were being projected for sub 10%. They're up to 17% ownership. Jets defense at 22% ownership. Greg Zuerlein at 23%. Chris Boswell at 17.5%. I still like this number, even though it has come up. Not the contrarian defense I was hoping it was going to be, but even at 17%, the Steelers defense, pretty interesting to me. Again, it's a home game in Pittsburgh. I think everybody's going to want to be going to the Jets. just playing it through. What if the Jets are awesome with Davante Adams? And it's a possibility that they are, but it's a home game for Pittsburgh, and they have a very good defense. So if they're going to be 17% owned, yeah, I have a lot of interest in the Steelers defense at this level of ownership. I'll be above weight to that. It's going to be one of my bigger stands on the slate, I think. I don't hate Chris Boswell at 17.5% ownership, 5,200. I'm probably going to try to be right around the field there, around 20%. Jets defense is, it's a little bit higher there. So 22%, I get it, because Russell Wilson is the quarterback they're facing, and they're only 4,200. So I understand why why the Jets are getting more ownership than the Steelers, but I can't really get on top of that. I'll probably shoot for around 20% Jets defense. I think it's reasonable. Again, 4,200. They still have a pretty good defense, even when they are banged up. At least I assume they're going to still be pretty good, even with DJ Reed out. But 22% seems enough that I don't feel the need to get overweight to that. Greg Zuerlein, similarly, like 23%. That's enough ownership that, maybe I shoot for around 20% of Jets defense and Greg Zuerlein. I think that would be a pretty solid number, not taking any major stand there. The only one that I'm really trying to hammer is the Steelers defense just a little bit, because I'm just hopeful that they're really good defense at home. Most people playing it through the Jets offense, so you're kind of getting some leverage on most of the field. Although I will have the Steelers defense with Aaron Rodgers stacks as well. So, oh no, Brandon, you torn ACL. That is brutal. I hate that. Last man in Muth Lazard. Last man in Muth Lazard. If Muth, I'll have 5-1 STL. 5-1 Pittsburgh if you have Muth. Who's your captain? I think that would affect it. Like, if you have Russell Wilson at captain, probably just go to Muth. Yeah, it depends on the rest of the lineup to some extent. So tell me a little bit more, race fan. In a vacuum, I think I prefer Muth, but not by enough that it's like a sure thing. So my answer without hearing more would be Muth. But if you want to give me more information, I would try to factor that in. And I also might be, I want to be clear here, I might be a huge idiot by not wanting to play Lazard today. To me, 7,400 for a wide receiver 3, just like, bells go off saying, no, don't do that. You don't want to do that. That's not a good play. But I could just be Aaron Rodgers loves Allen Lazard and wants to throw him the ball 10 times, no matter who else is on the team. I don't think that's the case. I think he wants to keep Garrett Wilson happy. I think that he probably wants to just target Davante Adams a ton, probably going to be excited to have him. So I think that we kind of lose Allen Lazard, but he's also could just score a random touchdown. I don't know, not a huge fan. All right, Captain Pickens. That might break the tie. That might break the tie to Lazard, especially if you have any other Pittsburgh pass catchers on your team with Captain Pickens. Then I would probably just break the tie to Lazard. If you don't have any other Pittsburgh pass catchers on the team, which I'm guessing you do because you said it's 5-1. If you don't have any other like true pass catchers, then you could still consider Moose. But I think with Pickens at captain, then maybe Lazard would be the better play there in a 4-2 build. Then okay, that's cool. If you had to choose Steelers or Boswell at captain, who would you go with? I think Steelers. Go with the Steelers defense. I'm more excited about them at lower ownership today in general. So yeah, I think it would be Steelers defense for me. All right, I'll take a look at FanDuel and then we'll build some lineups. Don't forget to play Flash Draft tonight. If things are not going your way, that's what I did. When was that? I guess it was on Thursday when I was. All right, I got to refresh this. Losing on the DFS site, losing the early flash drafts, and then the fourth quarter flash draft saved me. Ended up making some money on Thursday night. Always a good way. You just got to really correlate within your teams. It's really simple. Just correlate. If you pick a player, pick that player again. If you didn't pick a player, don't pick that player the next time. It's really, really straightforward. Most of the decisions on flash draft. Okay. Here's FanDuel at MVP. Breece Hall projected for. Is this right? FanDuel? I thought it was at 50% earlier. So I don't know what's going on there. Now projected for 23.5%. I like that quite a bit better. Breece Hall at MVP. I think that's a totally reasonable number for Breece Hall at MVP. Aaron Rodgers, 17%. Meh, I don't have an issue with it. Probably fading 10% Najee Harris at MVP. Not a huge issue with it, but if I think I prefer Russell Wilson a little bit cheaper, so probably just go there instead, or a little bit lower ownership, I should say. Davante Adams, I really like that here as well. 9% projected ownership feels pretty strong. I'll be above that on Davante Adams. 6% Garrett Wilson seems okay. 5% George Pickens, really like that. Throw George Pickens in the captain spot there. Hope that he can take advantage of the banged up Jet secondary. I'm not confident that they're going to be able to take advantage of it. I'm just hopeful, and the field is not doing it. So I think it's worth taking shots on it in large field GPPs. So I think Pickens makes sense at 5% ownership at MVP on FanDuel. Again, I do think you could go like the defenses in the MVP spot on FanDuel. Just really hope for a gross game. Hope that they just have one broken play where they score a touchdown, an interception for a touchdown, where you score interception point, and then you also get the touchdown, or even better, strip sack for a touchdown, where you get the sack, the fumble recovery, and the touchdown. Just one play, you can put up a lot of points as a defense, and it could be a low scoring game. So I don't hate the idea of playing one of these defenses in the MVP spot. I don't think I'm going too off the board with MVPs in general. Like I don't really anticipate any like huge scores from you. Even though I like Calvin Austin, I'm not really expecting him to put up like 20 fantasy points. So I don't know that I'm going to go too crazy at MVP. Probably still sticking, probably the defenses and or kickers. Probably the weirdest I get at MVP on FanDuel. But I like Pickens. I think that's a pretty solid number there. Davante Adams, I would say, are two of my favorite contrarian-ish picks at MVP. And then in the flex, Aaron Rodgers, 38%. That's okay. Breece Hall, 31%. This is the one spot where it's like, that's a little bit low on Breece Hall, I think. I don't mind that number. 30% going to Davante Adams, 30% Russell Wilson. None of these really stand out as mistakes. Najee, I'm probably still going to be a little bit light on Najee on FanDuel as well. George Pickens, though, I like that number, 23% ownership going there. Yep, sign me up for that. 22% going to the Jets, fine, seems fine. 23% Garrett Wilson at 13.5. But Jets defense, I guess they're 9,000, so the price tag is pretty nice. Steelers defense also 9,000, coming at 18%. So I'm going to like that again, just like on DraftKings. Also easier for a defense to keep up with position players where it's not full PPR. So yeah, I kind of like that Steelers defense number on FanDuel. Calvin Austin, 12% ownership at 7,500 looks pretty good. And I prefer these guys, like the Jeremy Ruckert. I like him on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, just like he scores one touchdown, you're more likely to be keeping up with your teammates who get a lot of volume. So I do like these kind of one-off guys who can just score, one random touchdown. I think it makes sense for guys like Jeremy Ruckert. I think I actually like Alan Lazard a little bit better on FanDuel at 14% ownership at 8,500. I think that's more playable. Tyler Conklin looks good at 12% ownership. So yeah, a lot of these kind of fringier players, I'm going to like them better on FanDuel. Just hope for one touchdown from one of them. And the field's not really going to be there. So you can get a huge leg up on the field if you choose the right guy and they score the touchdown. Yeah, I'm super excited for Tua. Let's go. That's going to be fun. I've got Tyreek Hill on my main season-long team, and it has been just brutal throwing him out there. So I'm excited about Tua being back. All right, let's play around with some lineups on DraftKings. Let's go to Davante Adams in the captain spot. So he's 1,500, paying up at captain. Think about going to Aaron Rodgers, but I'm not going to do it right away. Going to look at some other plays first. Maybe let's see if we can go Davante and Breece Hall in the same lineup, down to 6,150 per player. I do like Calvin Austin, so let's throw him in there. I like the Steelers defense. So we've got two star players from the Jets. Putting the Steelers defense in this lineup probably makes it less duplicated, at least a little bit. Now we have 8,700 left per player. I could go Pickens here. If I go Pickens, then I would have enough for Najee Harris. I don't really love Najee Harris on this slate. Garrett Wilson is there. Wait, what if I do? right, let me see. Go Pickens. I could go down to Freiermuth to leave salary on the table. Then I have 3 pass catchers, though, for the Steelers without the quarterback, which I don't love. So maybe I get away from Pickens and instead go to Aaron Rodgers. Just have him in there with Davante Adams. Now I have 7,800 left over. I've got Rodgers with Hall and Adams. I'm not going to throw Lazard in there. So maybe now I go Freiermuth, and now I just have 2 pass catchers from the Steelers, leaving 1,400 on the table. So you've got Davante Adams in the captain, Breece Hall in the flex, Kelvin Austin in the flex, Steelers defense. And then you have Aaron Rodgers and Pat Freiermuth. So you got Rodgers correlated with Davante Adams and Breece Hall. Then you've got Steelers defense. So some negative correlation there brings down the duplication quite a bit, and not necessarily negative ownership, because what if the Steelers just have a pick 6? It's only 1 loss point for Aaron Rodgers. Now he gets the ball back in a better situation to be throwing the ball, all things good. So yeah, I think this makes sense for a larger field GPP. This looks like a fine lineup. Let's try a Russ captain lineup. Just going to throw a Russ in there. I'm going to throw Pickens in this one. Want at least a double stack when I have Russell Wilson at captain. So I'm going to go back to Kelvin Austin again. Now let me see. What if I do a Jeremy Ruckert? Now I can play whatever I want. So now I could just throw in Breece Hall and Davante Adams. I'll be leaving some salary on the table. Yeah, I think that is just PPR scam it. Or maybe avoid the Breece Hall chalk, go Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson. Now we're leaving 4,300 on the table. That might be a bit much, because now I can get up from Kelvin Austin. No, I think he could outscore. I could get up from Kelvin Austin to Pat Freiermuth here, but I think it's certainly reasonable for Kelvin Austin to outscore Pat Freiermuth. The defenses and kickers, you need him to outscore all of them, but I think he very well could. I could also get up from now here, maybe, since I have 4,300 left over, probably rather get away from Ruckert and get on to Steelers defense. 1,100 on the table. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. Russell Wilson double stack with Pickens and Kelvin Austin. Steelers defense in there, and then Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson from the Jets. I think that looks fine, like a pretty solid large field GPP lineup. Yeah, I know. I'm talking it into existence. It's going to absolutely kill me. Jason says Lazard. I don't love Lazard. Is my Lazard analysis. He's too expensive and still getting ownership. I am ready for him to absolutely kill me, but I'm not doing it. I'm not going with Lazard today. I think he's just getting too much ownership for my liking. All right, should I do one more? Is it even worth trying a Fields lineup? Just like, I'm gonna have a share or two of Justin Fields. Probably not worth building it out, because it's one of those things that is just so gross. You're just hoping that things go awry. So maybe not worth building out a Fields lineup. What else could I do at captain? I mean, if I do a Breece Hall captain lineup, so what would that look like? Breece Hall. So now you're eating the chalk at captain. So right away, I'm thinking I probably want to do something that is more contrarian. So probably either leaving salary on the table or using somebody who's more off the wall. So maybe I'll go Jeremy Ruckert, bring down the ownership quite a bit. And then I can get different by playing Steelers defense with Aaron Rodgers. Now I'll throw in Davante Adams, 8,400 left over. Right now, I want to throw Pickens into this lineup, but it's going to be duped for sure if I throw Pickens into this lineup. Even with Jeremy Ruckert in here, I would imagine that would be a highly duplicated lineup. So that's kind of a bummer. I could go down. The prices are weird on this site, I got to say. Now, it could go down to Lazard, who I don't love. Could go down to Freiermuth. Maybe I do that. Maybe I just do Freiermuth here. We're leaving 2,000 on the table. You got Aaron Rodgers stacked up with Davante Adams and Breece Hall and Jeremy Ruckert. Steelers defense, Pat Freiermuth. I think this would be a fine lineup. Even if you want to play Lazard, I think this would be a lineup that would make sense to have Lazard in the lineup as well. Just a full-on Jets onslaught. I think that would be a fine Lazard lineup. Some negative correlation with having Rodgers not in the captain spot and then have 3 pass catchers with him. So I don't totally love that. maybe that's not right. Maybe that's not good. Keep getting to Freiermuth. He's just in that price range. If I don't want to go to Alan Lazard, kind of end up on Freiermuth without wanting to. Could also go up from the Steelers defense. Could throw Boswell in here. Maybe just do that instead. Steelers defense or instead of go Zerline for the Jets. So now you've got Aaron Rodgers with Davante Adams, Jeremy Ruckert, and the running back Breece Hall. Then you have Greg Zerline in there. I think this could work. Leaves 3,400 on the table. These aren't my favorite lineups that I'm landing on today. They're like playable, but not awesome. All right. Yeah, you have been trying to sell me on the single stat, and I haven't tried it yet. You're you're working. It's working. I'm so busy on Sundays that I have not ended up doing it. What's up, Matt? Good to see you in Maple Grove. I think I bought my car there, I believe. Wait, who you got? Oh, you're asking Antonio. All right, let's see. Any other questions that I'm missing here? Does Adams know the system? They say he's going to be a full go tonight. I'm expecting a full workload for Davante Adams tonight. I think he's been in the league long enough that he just knows how he can fit into systems more easily than like a rookie. So I had some concerns about it, but I think all the coach speak suggests they're just going to throw him out there, and I think he'll figure it out with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think it's going to be that different than what he has done in the past. So yeah, I think it's fine. With Rodgers captain, it would be 2 to 3 receivers. Like I want to have at least 2 if I have Rodgers a captain. Russell Wilson or Garrett Wilson. I like them both. Depends on the rest of the lineup. Like really hard to answer that in a vacuum. But I think I'll have probably more Russell Wilson at captain. Okay. All right. I think I've scrolled up enough for a question. So I think we're good here. All right. I think that is going to do it because I got to go make some lineups, but really appreciate you all hanging out with me for the show. If you have not already done so, would appreciate it if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the video, comment. All of that is very helpful as I'm trying to grow the channel. Would very much appreciate it. I am going to get going and make some lineups, but thank you all for being here, and I will be back tomorrow. We've got a 2-game slate. Adam is going to join me in the late afternoon. Just going to do one show tomorrow in the late afternoon, and I'll go with Adam for about an hour, and then I'll continue on by myself for a little while after that. So all right, CMOS, one more question. You say if you're quick, if you're really quick, I'll give you 20 seconds. Oh, now you're saying thank you. Okay, good. So you're joking. Okay, it was a joke. All right, thank you guys. I got to go make some lineups, but appreciate all of you, and I will catch you tomorrow.